Hello, and welcome to the JAGGAER 19.3 release feature demonstration for contracts. In 19.3, there have been many enhancements made to the JAGGAER contract solution. This includes the enablement of dynamic clause management, signatories management redesign, a save as new contract creation wizard, along with several other additional enhancements. The first feature we will review is dynamic clause management. Currently, clauses can only be marked as mandatory or optional in the clause management area of templates. Now, clauses can be configured as mandatory, optional, or conditional for use in contracts. The insertion of conditional clauses in contracts is driven by responses to configured fields in the additional information area of the contract. The field types that can drive or define the condition are the yes/no field type, the single choice option list, and the multiple choice option list. For example, a yes/no field in the additional information area of a contract may be configured to insert a clause if the user selects yes, or not insert the clause if the user selects no. Also, now you have the ability to define if the content of a clause is editable or read-only. This setting is independent from whether the clause is mandatory, optional, or conditional. The configuration of this feature requires the existing Manage Templates right to change the settings, and the Clause Link Validator in Templates right to validate the settings and allow them to become active when a contract is created from a given template. Now let's go into the solution and see how this feature works. I am logged into the contract solution as a user with the Manage Templates user right. I'm currently in the Contract Templates area, and the contract template that we're going to be working with today is called Service Contract Template. Now that I'm in this contract template, I'm going to go to Contents Management and Clause Management. Here we can see the clauses that have already been configured and linked to our contract template. Each clause has a View Library Content link on the right-hand side. If we click that, it will open a window that shows information about the clause, and below we can see the actual clause contents. On the left, we can see link properties for each of the clauses with various icons, and we'll talk about what each of those icons means in a few moments. First, let's talk about how to configure the properties of the clause. I'm going to go to this first clause here, and I'm going to click this pencil and paper icon. This is where we can edit the clause properties. We could view the library content right from here if we wanted to, but for now, I'm going to go ahead and select Edit so that I can make changes to the current link properties and we can see how this feature works. First, let's discuss the link type. We have three options here: mandatory, optional, or conditional. If we select mandatory, that means the clause must be inserted in the main contract document with no option to disable the clause. If we select optional, the clause may be inserted or not, and then we have this option conditional. If we select conditional, now we have to choose the activating condition by choosing a question. If we click Select Question, that's going to take us to a page of questions that can drive the insertion of the clause in the MCD. Here on this page, we have the already configured questions in the additional information area that are the following question types: yes, no, the option list with a single choice, or the multi-choice option list. Notice the editable by column. We have buyer and supplier listed here. That's telling me who can edit this additional information field. So just be aware that buyer responses to the additional information fields, as well as supplier or main contractor responses, can both drive the conditional insertion of clauses. I'm going to add this question here, this conditional yes/no question. It's a mandatory buyer field. Once I add the selected question, now I need to set the rule. So if the response is equal to yes, then it's going to insert this clause in the MCD. I'll go ahead and confirm my choice. And now it takes me back to the clause link properties page. I could edit the condition, which takes me back to the previous page. Maybe I actually want to say if they respond no, it's going to insert the clause and confirm. Or I could remove the condition altogether. Perhaps I want to select a different question, or maybe I want to change the link type to mandatory or optional. Now below the link type, I have an option for clause content editable in contract. This determines if the content of the clause is available to be edited, or if it appears as read-only in the contract. This is independent from the setting above. So maybe we choose to have mandatory clauses that have editable content, or maybe optional clauses that appear read-only. These two settings here are independent from one another. In this instance, I'm going to allow the editing of the content in the contract for this clause, so I'll leave that as yes. And now I'll click Save. Now my changes are saved. We can see the current clause link properties on the left, along with the suggested clause link properties on the right. Since my user doesn't have the clause link validator in templates user right, it's currently going to leave this as suggested, and it will require approval from someone who does have that user right. Let's go back to the clause management list, and let's take a look at what each of these icons mean. You may recall that this clause, prior to the editing, was listed as mandatory. If I hover over this red asterisk, I see that the clause link properties is set to mandatory. Similarly with clauses 4 and 5, that red star means that the clause is marked as mandatory. Now we did just change it to conditional. You'll notice that in the validation column, we have a change listed here that hasn't been approved yet. So once we log in as a different user and approve that change, we'll see the icon that represents the conditional link property clause. You can hover over the other icons to see what they represent as well. The gear means that the clause is marked as optional, and this red icon indicates that the clause is marked as read-only or not editable in the contract. Let's choose to make another clause conditional. I'm going to click into this clause number 5, and I will edit the properties. This time I'll select conditional, and the question that I'm going to choose is going to be a multi-choice option list. I'm going to choose to make this supplier manufacturing region the question that drives the insertion of this clause. So I'll add the selected questions. And now what you'll notice is because this is a multi-choice select and not a yes/no field type, the rule and values look slightly different. So in this case, what I'm going to say is that at least one of the selected values below is South America, Europe, or Africa, then that's going to drive the insertion of this clause. So I could say that the user has to select all of these three or none of these three, but in this case, I'll just say if they select at least one of these three, then it's going to insert the clause. So I'll confirm my choice there. I'll leave the content editable in the contract and save. And once again, we can see the suggested clause link properties here on the right highlighted in green. So if we go back to clause management, we'll see here that for clause number 5, we have a change. So since my user does not have the user right called clause link validator in templates, what I need to do is submit my changes for approval or for validation. If I wanted to change my mind before I send this for validation, what I could do is go back into the clause and either edit or undo my link changes. But what I want to do in my example today is alert a user within my organization who does have the clause link validator in templates user right so that they can approve my changes. What I'm going to do in just a moment is click the freeze and send validation alert. There is some new functionality here, as in the past I could click this button as many times as I wanted to, but now what's going to happen is when I click this, it's going to freeze any editing and make this page read-only, and I'll just have to wait for validation before I can take any more actions. It's reminding me of that here. Once I click OK, notice that if I click on the link properties, there's no option to edit or make any changes here. So now, as this user, I will just wait for an approver to take a look and validate the changes to those properties. Now I am logged in as a different user who does have the clause link validator in templates user right. I'm viewing the contract template that we were just working on, and I'm in the clause management section of that contract template. Here I can see the validation column that tells me that there's a change for 2 of my clauses. If I want to go in and look at the link properties and see those suggested changes, I can click in here, and I can see they want to make this link type conditional upon this activating condition question. And same thing for my clause number 5. Once I'm ready to make a decision, what I can do is click Manage Link Validation. And over here in the decision column, I have a drop down that allows me to either validate or reject the changes. For today, I'm going to validate both of the changes that were made and confirm. We can see that we have a change here. This is no longer a mandatory clause. It's marked as conditional. So this icon here with the paper and the link indicates that it is a conditional clause. Now, since our contract template is active, it's available to have a user create a contract from it, and I'll show you that next. To create a contract from this template, I'll click Create Contract. I'll give it a title. I'll select a project just like always. And I'll also select a main contractor. I'm going to go ahead and click Create. I'll make sure that all of my required fields are complete and save. So now for the purposes of this demonstration, I'm going to jump right to the contents management and clause management area of the contract. This clause management area should look familiar because we have our clauses that are already linked to the contract, as well as the icons that indicate the link properties associated with each. Now, these clauses cannot be deleted, but they can be disabled if they were marked as optional. For example, let's take a look at this clause number 8. In this 3 dots menu, I have the option to disable the clause because it is marked as not mandatory, it is optional. And also because the content of the clause was marked as editable, I have this option to edit the clause here. If I go back and look at some of my other clauses, this clause that's marked as mandatory with the red asterisk, in the 3 dots menu, I don't have the option to disable the clause because it is mandatory. But the content is editable here, so I see that edit button. For one other example, if I look at this clause that is marked as not editable, you can see that we do not have an edit button for this read-only clause. Now let's go back. Be aware that my user also does have permission to link additional clauses to this contract, but not all users may have that permission. Let's look at the master document area. I could click Create New Proposal, and it's going to tell me the conditional clauses as well as the activating condition question that's going to drive the insertion of that clause. If I were to click Create New Proposal from here, I'm going to get an information message that tells me I cannot create it until I complete the mandatory fields. So with that said, let's cancel and go to the additional information area, and I'll go ahead and edit these fields. I'm going to select Europe for a response here for supplier manufacturing region. You might recall that that is an activating condition question, so we'll see how that impacts our clauses in a few moments. This was another activating condition question. It's a buyer mandatory field, and my response is no, which if you recall from the configuration, we said if we select no, it is going to insert the clause. Now those are the only required fields in the additional information area by me, the buyer, so I'll save my responses there. And just remember that we do have some supplier or main contractor editable fields here that also could drive our conditional clauses. Mine is not configured that way today, but be aware that that is a possibility with this feature. Now that I've completed the additional information area from my side, I'm going to go to the master document area and try again. I'll create a new proposal. This time we can see the question response, and these 2 activating condition fields have been completed. So I'll create my new proposal. And if I view the document, we can see that all of our clauses that we expected to be in the main document have been inserted due to those responses to the additional information area. That concludes the demonstration on the dynamic clause management feature. The next feature we will discuss is signatories management redesign. Currently, the parameters and user rights for managing local signatories did not fulfill customers' needs. Specifically, with the usage of advanced electronic signature, customers may want to restrict the management of certified contact information to a granted set of users as far as the signatories to be involved is related. With this release, new configuration options and user rights will be introduced to provide further segmentation of users that can configure global or local signatories, improve usability, and better support different business cases. You will now be able to granularly assign rights for each of these areas. The management of global signatories, which is still managed by users with the existing Manage Users, Roles, User Lists, and Divisions right, as well as super users. The management of local signatories, which is only available with this new parameter that we're going to discuss. And usage and configuration of signatories in contracts and contract templates. In 19.3, the existing Manage Signatories right will be renamed to Edit Signatories List in Contracts. It will grant the following permissions: select global signatories, sort signatories, export list, deactivate a signatory when the signatory's details are accessed, and delete signatories. If a user wants to create local signatories in 19.3, their organization will need a new parameter activated and they must be assigned a new user right called Create Local Signatories in Contracts. The new parameter, called ECM MCD Local Signatory, is required to have this user right become available. This parameter has 3 configuration options that can be applied. Users in the organization can be restricted to creating local buyer signatories only, local supplier signatories only, or the users can be allowed to create both local buyer and local supplier signatories. Be aware, to minimize impact during the deployment of 19.3, all customers who have the ECM MCD e-signature parameter will have this new local signatory parameter activated automatically with the value that allows the ability to create both local buyer and local supplier signatories. This will ensure that you don't see any change to the existing functionality unless you'd like to. In 19.3, the Create Local Signatories right will be automatically assigned to users who previously had the Manage Signatories right in 19.2, again to ensure that users who could previously manage local signatories don't experience a difference once 19.3 rolls out. If you would like to remove this right for some users in your organization, be sure to disable the user right. Also, if a user had that Manage Signatories right prior to this release, then that user will automatically have the Edit Signatories List in Contracts right upon the release of 19.3 features, once again just to minimize the impact on usability of their daily tasks. With the ECM MCD e-signature parameter enabled, the signatories area will be accessible in contracts, and contract templates will behave in read-only mode to all users assigned with the View Master Document area right on the specific contract or template, in edit mode to all users assigned with the Edit Signatories List in Contracts user right on a contract or template, or for creation of local signatories for users assigned with the Create Local Signatories in Contracts right on the contract or template. And of course, this is only if that ECM MCD local signatory parameter is activated. Remember that this parameter will be automatically activated if you have the ECM MCD e-signature parameter already. If you would like this parameter deactivated, or if you want to make changes to the configuration, please contact JAGGAER. The next feature we will review is the Save as New Contract creation wizard. Currently, a set of information is automatically copied from the source contract to the target contract. Only a few fields can be changed when creating a new contract. Now, users have the option to transfer items, like subcontractor, prices, attachments, etc. They can also decide if the content for the clause should come from the library or from the source contract. The behavior differs slightly if the two contracts are in the same project or not. If the new and existing contracts are in the same project, then copying the clauses from the source contract will cause the inheritance of the clause's content status, for example, approved or to be approved. If the new and existing contracts are in different projects, then any clauses modified in the source contract will be copied to the new contract in to be approved status, and any clauses that have not been modified in the source contract will be copied in their original status and be managed with the standard process of clause approval in the new contract. Next, we will talk about some additional enhancements that have taken place in the 19.3 release. The additional enhancements that have been made to the JAGGAER contract solution in 19.3 include a new notification when contracts cannot be expired. Sometimes contracts reach their end date, but they do not move to expired status because there are some actions that still need to be taken by the main contractor. This can cause some confusion. But now, if this scenario occurs, an alert will be sent to the users in the email recipients list. An icon will also be available, shown here, beside the status of the contract in the following lists: My Contracts, Global Contracts, and Contract Discussions. We've now allowed for the ability to link a contract to an RFQ as generic, even if the MCD proposal version in the contract is in to be signed status. We've improved some processes for archiving contracts, including automatic closure of open discussions that may be preventing the contract from being archived. We also now consider the termination date of contracts for archival rather than the original end date of the contract. JAGGAER has improved the functionality for searching contracts by adding a new search filter, which allows users to search for contracts that have the additional information area editable by the main contractor. We've enhanced the management of the additional information area, as well as the master document and price list areas when configured, by now giving the buyer the option to recall editability from the main contractor. This can occur if a contract is managed in a project with workflow, and the contract has been linked or moved to a task that has been configured with activity filters that prevent the action from being taken. This enhancement will allow the buyer to address the issue without having to find a solution using workflow. The process of creating a contract from an RFQ is now more flexible by giving the user the option to transfer the price list total as the total value of the contract. This option will be selected by default to maintain current behavior, but buyer users now have the choice rather than the total contract value always automatically being copied from the price list. Finally, we have improved usability if the contract's details are not accessible by the main contractor. In this configuration, the Visible to Main Contractor area in Attachments will not be available. It will be hidden. Be aware that if you already have uploaded some files in this area, that after the 19.3 release, those files will not be accessible anymore if the main contractor does not have access to the Contracts module. To learn more about Contracts release features, as well as features in the other JAGGAER solutions, please visit the Product Release Library to view additional training videos and to access the release notes. Now that you've learned about the new features available with the JAGGAER 19.3 release for contracts, start testing them for your organization. We hope this new functionality will empower procurement at your organization, and we welcome you to contact us with your questions and feedback. Thank you very much for watching.